I think the most important reason why a student should keep a visual diary is simply because you forget the ideas that you have.
If I draw something down, or if I make a mark, or if I research it further, and I make a note on that, then my ability to recall it and then apply it and use it is much enhanced.
Sometimes when you're starting to brainstorm and then you start to develop an idea and then you end up with this half-made creative work, you're not quite sure how you got there and why, it's very easy to lose sight of why you began that project in the first place. So a visual diary is like an anchor. It helps you to remember the motivations, the inspirations, the reasons why you took that journey in the first place.
Design isn't a linear process, it's like a cycle, so you can always go back to ideas, and unfortunately a lot of people, and I did this a lot as well, I kind of went down one idea and I got lost, so having that trail really does allow you to go back and keep on working on ideas instead of getting lost in one.
A process journal is a way of working with those ideas, thinking about them, working with visual aspects also, but thinking about the process. And unless they actually start that process with a journal, the ideas can just remain inside their minds and nobody will ever know about them.
Probably the most important reason why students should keep a visual diary is A, for themselves, but it also gives the tutor or the lecturer an opportunity to see how they got to that endpoint. So if the endpoint's not quite working, for example, or the outcome or the design solution, the tutor might be able to go back and say, well, look at this great idea that you had over here, why don't you explore that a bit more?
A visual diary is probably far more interesting to look at than the end piece of work, because that really shows you what the student or what the person or the designer is thinking. The end piece of work is just a snapshot at the end of it.
I have upwards to 100 students. I can't get to know them all, but when I review their process diaries online, I can see inside their thinking processes, I can contribute to that.
From looking at their diary, I can see much better how I can help them. Perhaps they need more tuition in particular types of techniques, or perhaps they have too many ideas at too superficial a level and you have to sort of guide them and say, now take some of those ideas and research them in greater depth.
It's really easy to get lost in your own concepts and also in your own thoughts and in your own head. Showing it to a tutor really lets you move out of that mind space that you're in because it's someone completely different.
It just shows who put a lot of effort in and who didn't as well. If you turn up with like piles and piles of books of crazy experiments and all of these different paths that you went down and your final project just died the day before, at least you can show your teacher, look, this is what I did.
A paper-based visual diary is excellent in terms of immediacy. I can pick up a pencil and you can get down those ideas really roughly, really quickly.
With a physical diary, you can also introduce textures into it. So you might find something that you just, a piece of paper or a leaf or whatever that you found lying around, and you can just stick it into it. So it's a very textured, tactile medium to work with.
The disadvantages of a paper-based diary, I guess for me personally anyway, it's about organisation. I will have 100 pieces of paper everywhere and often I will lose these and they become disorganised.
One of the disadvantages about a physical diary is that you can't include so much multimedia into it. So when you're researching something, for example, you might be looking at other designers' work and you find a lot of examples of their work or you find interesting web links, it's harder to then go and write that into your visual diary. Whereas if you've got a digital visual diary, you can just quickly copy the link into it.
One of the biggest benefits of keeping a visual diary in digital format is the fact that you can search, you can cross-reference very, very easily. So in terms of archiving, all your ideas can be cross-referenced, they can be found easily, and often you can get feedback directly from people on those ideas very easily.
You don't have to be tech savvy to have a digital diary because Web 2 applications have been designed so that anyone can pick them up, anyone can use them very quickly. An example of a digital diary might be a Tumblr website where images and thoughts and ideas, drawings are kept, or it could be using a program like Evernote to store things, everything you're thinking.
They should not forget that pencils and paper exist because they're working with physical surfaces and physical elements throw up their own possibilities as well, and you may never know those if you don't experiment with those as well.
The most important thing I would look for in a student's visual diary is evidence of exploration and experimentation. The reason for this is because students need to push themselves beyond those first immediate obvious ideas.
I look for the person's own ideas, and that's through things like sketching that we talked about, but then also what they're looking at along the way. I think referencing work that's around you and being in touch with your field is crucial as well. But who are your influences? What are you looking at the time of doing this project? What sort of things are contributing to your ideas?
You'd hope by, I guess, towards the end of, let's say, a 4-week project, that students are showing a real sort of depth to their thinking.
You have to be careful as creative people, artists, designers, not to be caught up in what's expected, and always thinking outside of the square, which is kind of funny because the diaries are that shape.
I think the most important thing I look for in a student's visual diary is evidence of process, evidence of their thinking process.
The one piece of advice I would give to students about documenting their process in a diary is to not do it after the fact. Make sure that you use that diary to help develop your ideas, and don't just go back later on after you've done the design or the artwork and kind of fake it.
You can't lie and you can't hide with it. I'd prefer, a 30 centimetre high stack of ripped up things that are kind of collated and give me an idea of experimentation and process than something that's kind of thrown together at last minute that might look neat, that kind of has a superficial look of meaning and content, but it wears really thin.
The worst thing a student could do in a visual diary is seem like they're just going through the motions, not actually using it to work with ideas. They're missing an opportunity if they do that, but if they're not working with an idea, it becomes dull to read. Putting up class notes, for example. I give class notes out to students. Some of them just copy and paste them and put them back in their visual diary. That is not what a visual diary is for.
People writing in sketchbooks, I find it's fine to annotate things, but people quickly go back to, especially say first-year students, quickly go back to their reliance on the word, and they write out their ideas. And that to me says that you can't visually communicate your ideas. You're relying back onto text, which you've done for the last 10 years at high school.
For me, a diary is not just a place where you photocopy lots of words and stick them in there. I think that volume is something that matters, when in actual fact volume doesn't really matter. It's that crucial word or sketch that makes it really important.
The key piece of advice I would give towards documenting your process is to keep everything. Keep absolutely everything forever. And this is why digital diaries are so useful.
Try to achieve a 50-50, and what I mean by that is 50% verbal research, 50% visual, but make the verbal research as visual as you can in the different types of weighting and playing with the words.
The one piece of really important advice I'd give students about documenting work or documenting ideas is don't be too tight or too precious about it. A diary or a recording of your process shouldn't be important. It's about a collection of ideas. So I think the advice would be not to get too caught up in it looking right or looking perfect, or being the idea and you can't move on from that.